Good morning, Ed.
Good morning. I wanted to ask or check in or tell you something.
Okay.
There was something I saw the other week that I hadn't seen in the same way that I saw it last week.
Mm-hmm.
And it was sort of on topic, I guess, so I thought I'd check in about it.
Good. What did you see?
The sort of just that there's some sort of a real line between being identified and not being identified.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't, when you're not identified to, it was I sort of fell out of mind to a certain extent where it was like, oh wow, it's like,
Yeah.
I see, this makes sense. This is like what, it's like, oh, I'm seeing the character, and it's like a very third person experience.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So it's like, oh, him,
Yeah, like
that guy.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and oh wow, it really doesn't, none of it matters. Like it's totally like none of the things that he thinks are going to get him anything are going to get him anything. And
Yeah.
it's sort of some sort of independent thing that's playing out that doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
It's non-personal, I guess.
Yes, that's it,
right?
Isn't it? All of a sudden, you fell out of a personal relationship with Ed.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so strange because it seems so radically unmanufacturable by the character.
Yes.
And it's something it seems very other in a way.
Yeah. It's totally unmanufacturable by the character, isn't it?
Right. And
totally.
So there's but then the character, what the question is obviously coming to is like how because the character then obviously re-identifies, or not obviously, but there's a sense of that.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make any sense.
No.
Yeah.
Right. That's the funny thing about it, right? Once it's been seen, and then the identification happens again.
Right.
Even though the identification happens again, now it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And so it's like,
which doesn't keep it from happening.
No.
Right.
And yeah, I don't have anything very intelligent to say about it. It's like it's just bizarre, I guess, because it's almost like that because the thing that's so strange, I guess, is that he's being located, sort of, to me anyway, sometimes. But then in disidentification, there's a sense even of being non-located, even though you're located.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so I don't have anything good to say about that either.
Well, you've said it.
But
you said it.
But it doesn't. It just none of it makes any sense, and I don't know what on earth could be going on in any kind of, like, it doesn't make sense because really the character fundamentally can't do anything.
Right. Yeah.
Whatsoever.
Right.
Can't even
zero.
No, it's like there's like zero capacity for any level of volition or independence or will or any of these things outside of sort of the fictional mythologies that it creates around the experiences that it's having.
Right. Oh, that was beautiful. That was great. Yeah. The fictional mythologies it creates around the experiences it's having. Yeah.
Right, because there's that experience. There's the experience of that will. Right.
Yes.
But it's all happening within a very identified context.
Right.
So there's nothing outside of that world.
Mm-hmm.
It can't touch outside of that world.
No, it has no capacity to reach beyond its world.
Right.
Right. None. Like the Earth can't reach out and touch the moon.
Right.
You can go to the moon. The Earth can't go to the moon. The Earth and the Moon will always remain totally different things.
Right.
Yeah, so the character can never reach out and grab the truth or be the truth or pretend the truth or anything.
It can't even take action
No.
in relationship to wanting to understand something or to wanting to know truth.
Right. Well, it can take action, but it's not action that's really relevant.
Right. It can't be relevant.
Right. Yeah. By the very nature of it, it can't be relevant, can it?
Because it's all within that, like a very narrow context.
That's it. You're right. It can only live within its own context. And everything it does can only be about its context. No matter how intelligent it is, it still can only think within its own context.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It can imagine another context, but of course its imagination is completely locked up within its own context.
Right. It's all very narrow.
Yeah. Very, very narrow.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I guess that I don't have anything to say about that.
Of course, because you've said it.
Right.
I understand, because there isn't really anything to say about
there
it
can't
except
be a
to
next
report
step.
about it.
Right.
Right. There isn't a next step.
Because it's sort of just if it's like that reality principle visits in its essence outside of identification.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happens.
Right. That's reality's doing.
Right.
And only reality's doing. Yeah. And nothing that the character does has any relationship to what reality's doing.
Right.
Or can coax reality.
Right.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
It is bizarre, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like
Yes.
it's like there's two ways of being.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, they're not different though. There's something that's not different about them.
That's right, because everything is a creation of truth.
Right.
Or reality, we could say.
Right.
Or existence. So even an imaginary character or an imaginary self is still a creation, a manifestation of existence.
Right.
Yeah. That still doesn't mean that it has ultimate truth to it, but it is a total in the same way that when you have an imagination in the daytime or dream at night, it's not real,
Right.
but it is a product of your mind, and therefore it is entirely your mind. So illusion is actually entirely truth, you see?
Yeah. So what's I lost track. I was thinking about something. What I was thinking about was that this is really strange, okay? As the character is what's confused and talking right now, right? But the character is the only one that thinks there's two things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's what's interesting, right? Is because when the character is disidentified with, there's not two things. Mm-hmm. There's just the witnessing of the character. Right.
And no separation.
And so only the character can talk about other.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so it's strange, I guess.
Very strange.
Yeah.
Because you see, the whole game is predicated on the character, right?
Right.
The whole thing. Enlightenment. Enlightenment's only relevant to the character.
Because that which is witnessing doesn't care.
No, that which is witnessing is awake. It doesn't. It's like enlightenment. What the hell would that possibly mean?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
To the character, enlightenment means its deliverance from its own illusion.
Right.
But of course,
that doesn't make any sense.
It can't get beyond its own illusion because
it is illusion.
It is illusion. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. See, that's why all of spirituality ultimately is about pushing the character into checkmate.
Yeah. I can see why you don't take this very seriously. Yeah.
Now you see, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can't possibly take it seriously. No.
Yeah.
Any more than someone that says, I'm fantasizing about being in Fiji and
Right.
there's a tsunami coming. What do I do?
Right. Put up the sail.
I don't know. Run like hell, whatever you want to do. Meditate, beg for God, light incense, or just grab a surfboard. It doesn't matter. You know? You could say, you're not in Fiji. Wake up, you dreaming fool. But it's probably not going to be heard, is it?
Yeah, the character would get offended. Probably.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. I'm not being seen.
That's exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. I'm not being seen, right? You're not taking me seriously. You don't love me.
Yeah. Oh boy.
But I love characters about as much as I can love something that has no existence.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
boy. That's it. Isn't that funny?
It is. Well, something's funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess it's just strange that it has that capacity to be believed and not believed
Yeah.
within a span of a few minutes.
Within the span of a few minutes and also simultaneously.
Okay.
That's what you mentioned when you can go from one to the other.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, identification can happen again. But once you've seen what we'll just call the other, reality, whatever,
Right.
once it's been realized, you can't completely unrealize it even when the identification happens. You can mostly unrealize it, but you can't totally unrealize it. That's when you're identified, but you're not. Mm-hmm. You're in illusion, but you know it's illusion, so you're not in illusion in the same way when you thought it was truth, but you're in illusion knowing that it's not illusion, still being caught in illusion, right? That's a very peculiar place to find themselves in. And that's where a ton of people find themselves in right now. A lot. As I knew they would. Because I just, you know how this thing goes. Years ago when I started to teach, in the first few years, and I was, started to be invited to places, and I remember saying to various people very clearly, everyone was like, oh my God, go to a satsang, wake up, and you just realize who you are, and it was this whole huge, enormous hype. If any of you remember, like 9 or 10 years ago, it was just like, all you got to do is turn awareness to its source, and boom, and blah blah blah. And I used to say to people, I'd go, I wonder what's going to happen when the other shoe drops. Now, for some people, that stayed permanent, but at some point, whether it's a minute or a week or a month or a year, often this re-identification without being totally re-identified happens. And that's what I was meant all those years ago. I wonder what's going to happen when the other shoe drops. Because it's going to drop. Because it's just sort of standard practice. It's just part of the way it goes. That tends to happen. And that's okay. That tends to happen. And then at some point, that stops happening. That re-identification stops happening at some point. But you can never tell when. You just can't tell when. And the thing is you can't give, as you're already seeing, Ed, and I love you being up here because you're actually voicing it very, very clearly, is that the character can't do anything about it. Right? And that's a hard pill for the character to swallow. There's nothing I can do about it. But actually that pill that's hard for the character to swallow, when it does, and remember, there's really not much it can do about doing that, but when it does really swallow it, really take it in, there's nothing I can do. That's the necessary next step. There is nothing I can do. And not just the realization of it, but a spontaneous surrendering that happens in the character. Because surrendering can only happen in the character, right? Truth doesn't surrender it. There's nothing for it to surrender to. Truth sees there's nothing I can do. It struggles with that. It goes in circles with that. It goes to teachings and teachers and tries everything it can to avoid that. What do I do about, how do I stay in the awake state now that I've visited it all the time? And the character will go anywhere that promises to have a nice, easy fix for that. But the real thing the character needs to hear is there's nothing you can do about it. That's what the character needs to hear. That's the last thing it wants to hear. But once it's visited the truth, that's what the character actually knows. As you yourself have said, it knows that. It doesn't want to know it. But it's too late, you see, because once you've visited the truth, the character, it knows that. Even if it doesn't want to know it. Even if it desperately doesn't want to know it, it still does. And at some point, at any point, the character swallows that pill, that bitter pill, and totally accepts that. As soon as the character totally accepts that, surrenders to it, absolutely, then there's no more possibility of being caught in it. That's the paradox. The character must totally take in, surrender to, however you want to see it, completely, that there's nothing it can do. Completely. And when it does take that in, when it does surrender to it, when it does swallow that bitter pill completely, what happens is there's nothing left in the character to get consciousness to adhere to that limited context. There's nothing in it. It's still there, right? It's talking to you. Character's here. But then there's nothing in the character that is sticky anymore. So once you've seen, even in the character, it knows the necessity. It knows that what's true for it is that there's nothing it can do. It even knows that it can't even, there's nothing it can do to accept that truth. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. There's nothing he can do. And someone could say, well, how do I totally accept that truth? How do I, but see, there's nothing it can do for that either, is there? Because it has no will of its own. It has no volition of its own, so it can't do it. This isn't a process of will and volition. It's a process of wisdom and awakening. It's a process of letting ourselves know what we actually already know. Anything else?
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Enjoy yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.